Hey there.
Hello, Colette. How are you? I'm gonna make you a.
Good. How are you doing?
I'm well.
No problem.
That way you could run your stuff.
Perfect.
Is recording. Did you know Simbot? Hello.
Heard his name many times, but have never formally met, I think.
Oh, nice.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So I know we have some people that aren't going to be here for the Zoom meeting, but we recorded and put on YouTube. So a lot of
Awesome.
people are very interested about this. They have a group of people, two different groups of people have scrimmages and stuff like that, so they wouldn't be able to be signed in right now, but they'll get the info as they get going. And
Totally understandable. It's the nice thing about doing everything virtual nowadays.
yeah. And whereabouts are you?
I'm in Indianapolis.
Okay.
So kind of in the Midwest.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll be back in California soon, but have to bear the winter here.
I was gonna say, how bad is it right now over there?
We had like 3 snow days this week where nobody really left their houses.
Not as bad as Texas,
but
though.
I mean, we thankfully have power and heat and snow plows that can plow everything so we can get around, but other places are not usually so fortunate. We're kind of used to it here now.
It's just been really windy for us here.
Yeah, that's what I was hearing. My mom was telling me that the wind has been kind of wild.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Our backyard,
the awning.
Yeah, that thing.
Oh, really? Yeah, I walked out today, and it was like, oh, it was nice at the beginning in the morning, and then just out of nowhere, it just started to blow. So my wife and I went for a walk, like near the Hollywood sign for a bit today, and I was like bundled up. I was like, man, this is too windy for me.
Yeah, the wind makes it a lot colder, but you guys have some nice weather there right now. So
that's true.
But anything, honestly, like before I moved here in Oklahoma, I was anything below like 60, I was freezing all the time. Yet I could spend hours in a rink and that wasn't that bad, but for some reason outside cold is so different.
Yeah. You grow kind of accustomed to certain things.
Yeah, definitely.
It's even funny out here, like each rink is like is distinctly different of how cold one is.
Yep. Definitely the one in Northridge is the coldest one I've been to.
Yeah, it's pretty chill.
The valley. Yeah, that one is like probably the coldest I've ever walked into.
Yeah, Valley now.
We'll give it a couple more minutes till some of the other people get on, and then we'll just get started.
Yeah, of course.
I know we had like 38, 30, something like that signed up. So people come on as they go. But again, it'll be good because we're recording. So okay, go from there. And do you see my name?
I see. Yeah, it's blocking me off.
Yeah,
that's cool. Not like.
Well, it says my name on it, so.
No, whatever.
Mm-hmm. I just noticed that the bullets are off there, but...
The cat face on you. Have you seen that video?
Oh, that.
Oh, no, like cat leak up the seed.
Oh, like one of the Instagram ones. Yeah, see, everyone starts to rolling right at 5. So perfect. I think we'll just get started now. Then, Colette, if you're good with that, I'll introduce and kind of go. Hi, everyone. So we're here with the Flyers Educational Zoom series. Again, we have Miss Colette on, and she is a sports nutritionist who's going to go over some topics about healthy eating, all those kind of things. Our big push, obviously, with this series is that players get different viewpoints, different things to help them be the best athletes that they can possibly be. And I think nutrition is obviously very undervalued and something that's very important for players of all ages, whether they're young or old. And you could see a huge difference in their demeanors, their attitudes, and their performance just by what they're putting in and out of their bodies on a day-to-day basis. So we're going to turn this over to Miss Colette. She could give us a background on her stuff, and I think she's got a little thing to show everybody.
Yeah, of course. Let me go ahead and share my screen really quick. There we go. Let me go ahead and present this full screen. Get to the start of this presentation. Everyone can see this, right?
Yeah, it looks good.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Awesome. Well, I'll go ahead and get started. I'm hopefully going to talk only for about 20 to 30 minutes. Feel free if you want to, while I'm talking, go ahead and type any questions you might be thinking in the chat so you don't forget them. I'm more than happy to answer any questions after this. I'm really just going to be going over most of the basics for nutrition, especially with considerations for ice hockey. But I really do think a lot of these principles can be applied to anybody that is active, but I will throw in some stuff specifically for hockey. A little bit about me. I was born and raised in Santa Clarita. I went to Saugus High School. I spent many years at the rink myself. I never played hockey or figure skated, but really did spend a lot of time there watching games and spending time with friends. I went to the University of Southern California, did my bachelor's there, then moved on and moved to Oklahoma to do my dual master's in nutrition. So I have quite a lot of experience in sports. Sports is my specialty. Moving along through my collegiate career, I interned in athletic departments. When I was in Oklahoma, I actually got to spend about 1.5 years working with OU's club hockey team. They're a ACHA Division I club hockey team. I did a lot of operations and I ran a lot of their nutrition program for them. I also did get to work with Paralympic sitting volleyball while I was in Oklahoma. Done a lot of other work, got to spend a season with the Seahawks, and currently I am in Indianapolis, Indiana, working at a performance center that works with athletes from the age of probably 8 or 10 years old all the way up to, I think my oldest client has been like in their 70s. So working with lots of different active athletes. We do actually have our youth hockey group that comes through our performance center too, that I have seen and worked with there as well. So have had some really great experiences working with all sports, but also hockey, just to give myself a little bit of a background. But now I'm going to talk about some high performance habits that I find if you can nail will really make you a better athlete, will keep you really healthy. But just a couple things that I kind of want to touch on. The first thing that I think any athlete has to nail is meal timing. Eating every 3 to 4 hours regulates our metabolism and it helps with our energy levels. It really does help you meet your goals. Whether you have a goal to lean out or gain weight, eating regularly is especially important for athletes. Should be eating 3 meals a day with a couple snacks mixed in, snacks between breakfast or lunch and dinner, or even after dinner if needed. But we want to make sure you're getting some constant fuel in your body, because if you are hungry before a training or before a game, you are not going to perform to your best. And making sure that you fuel yourself regularly throughout the day, make sure that you have any risk of injury during a game or a practice. The next thing that I really like to focus on is meal composition. So once you've gotten down eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner and throwing in some snacks in between, we need to talk about what goes in those meals. So the US Olympic Committee has developed these plates that help us better visualize what we need as an athlete without having to count calories, without having to measure our food or weigh it. I find that to be a skill that is kind of tedious and not necessary for most athletes. I think really observing what your training level is for that day and then matching your food to look like what you're training like is really important. It's a lot easier who don't really cook for themselves. They rely on parents or billet families or anybody else to be able to provide them food, or you're at school or you're eating, out. You need to be able to fuel yourself no matter where you are. And going based off of a plate is a lot easier than counting calories again, like I said. So these plates, as your training increases, start looking different. So starting with an easy training day, this might be a light day where you're just doing some recovery work, some rehab, some light activity. Normal day-to-day, your rest day. That might look like half your plate being fruits and vegetables, a quarter of your plate being lean protein, or any type of protein, honestly, as a developing athlete, and then some type of grain or carbohydrates. You might notice that my fruits and vegetables are different than my starchy carbohydrates because they both have different purpose. Colors in is especially important for making sure you don't get injured, making sure you don't get sick. Really, really important for those. And then your carbs, they serve a purpose as being your fuel, and your protein serves as the building build your recovery. So you need all three components, but I like to keep them a little separated. As you increase your training, maybe you have practice that night, or you did some dry land work, or you did your own exercise on your own. You want to be able to change your plate to match that. So what happens is, as you increase training, you are going to want to change the proportions. In a moderate training day, you might want to have a third of your plate be carbohydrates, about a third being fruits and vegetables, and then about a third being lean protein. Honestly, protein stays at 25% still, but an easier way to picture it is to just take your plate and put it in thirds and make sure that you're getting an even amount of all the nutrients that you need. The last plate that I like to show my athletes is a hard training day, or I would honestly say your game day plate. I'm not saying to eat this an hour before you go into a game, but as you're getting prepared for going into a game or a long activity, you want to make sure that you're fueling your body appropriately. What you'll see here is that your plate is 50% carbs. That is because our muscles primarily rely on carbs for us to be able to move. Protein is especially important for recovery, but not so much as your performance as an athlete during a game. You definitely need more carbohydrates. Carbohydrates can look like pasta, rice, potatoes, cereal, granola bars, applesauce, crackers, pretzels, anything you can think of that can be a carbohydrate in that sense. You really want to get at least half your plate the night before and the day of a game day. But again, you want to make sure your timing is where you're not eating it right before a game, because you will definitely have an upset stomach, and we don't want that to happen on the ice. Now that I've talked about composition, I kind of wanted to debunk a couple myths and talk a little bit about protein. I think protein is a really popular topic for athletes. We find that everyone focuses on protein. So I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that because I know I'll get some questions about it. First, I'll talk about the facts. Protein does help with muscle growth. It helps with muscle recovery. It helps with muscle growth. You need protein to be able to build back the protein that you have damaged through exercise. It's also important to include protein in every mealtime. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks should have some component of protein in there, just because it's easier for our bodies to absorb it as we spread it out throughout the day. It has a lot more benefit than if we just have a really large protein meal at dinner, or maybe just a large protein meal at breakfast. Spreading it out really does help with absorption and to make sure you're meeting your goals. It also is a really great bedtime snack. High protein bedtime snacks do help with recovery, soreness, and do help with building more lean body mass. So if your goal is to get bigger, having a bedtime snack of high protein is really important. Now I kind of want to get to some of the fiction that we might hear around protein. You might hear you need to eat more protein so that you can get bigger or to gain weight. You do need protein to be able to meet your goals, but you don't need more than what you're probably already eating. Getting 3 protein shakes in, if you're already eating 100 grams of protein in your day, is probably not important. You are much better fueling yourself with more carbohydrates to be able to meet the needs of your exercise than to just be adding more protein into your diet. The other thing is that we always talk about this being the most important component of a meal. A lot of athletes will skip carbohydrates and just load up on the protein, thinking that that's what's going to get them stronger, faster, and a better hockey player. But truly, having a more balanced diet is what's going to get you to be the best that you can be. Most of the time when we eat just protein, we fill up really quickly, and we tend to not get enough calories in us to meet the demands of our sport. So those are just some considerations to think about. I'm more than happy to answer some questions about that at the end of this. So again, the truth is that carbohydrates are essential to fuel hockey players. Most of the time what I see is that we're not getting enough carbohydrates. You might not be fueling yourself properly before a practice or a game. A lot of people go into games or practices hungry because they think that their stomach cannot handle any food. That might be true, but that means that you need to fuel a little bit sooner than some of your other teammates might need to. So with that, muscles need those carbs to fuel the demands of the game. You are doing explosive and quick shifts combined with a pretty extensive length of game. And usually most hockey players are playing multiple series per weekend. So you need to be able to make sure that your muscles have enough fuel in the tank to get you through that weekend. What we see is that after the first game, a lot of players start getting gassed. They start having a harder time recovering. They start having cramps. And this all could be due to fueling issues. They might not be getting enough carbohydrates to keep them going throughout the weekend series. So making sure that you have the best pre-game and pre-practice snack option. In addition to your meal that you have before a game, whether it be breakfast, lunch, or dinner, you want to have some type of pre-snack, whether that's maybe out an hour to 30 minutes before you get on to the ice or start getting dressed to get on the ice. So that could look like something like fruit leather bar, pretzels, with curbing that hunger, but still getting you enough calories and carbohydrates to get through to after a practice or a game. You can do things like yogurt. You can do basically anything that sounds enjoyable before you get on the ice. I find that for some people who have a harder time having solid foods, that juices or smoothies can be a really good thing to add in as a pre-game or a pre-practice snack. I would say for someone who wants to pay attention to how much they should be having, we usually say 30 to 60 grams is a really good amount of carbohydrates to fuel yourself before a game or a practice. One of my favorite topics to talk about with hockey players is hydration, just because we are an indoor sport that is in a cold environment does not mean that hydration is not important. It doesn't mean that you can't sweat large volumes, that you can't be a salty sweater or get dehydrated. Typically what we see is that sweat gets trapped inside your gear, which means that you're not properly cooling your body. You tend to overheat, which means that you need more hydration to keep your body cooled down. And another thing we know is that most hockey players will spit out their fluids during a game. They'll just swish it in their mouth to get their mouth from being too dry, and they'll spit it back onto the ice. That is not proper hydration. You really should be consuming that hydration throughout your game, because you are losing a lot of volume, more than you really think you are. So some strategies to help with that is to aim to drink half your body weight in ounces daily. What I think that is really useful is knowing what type of bottle you have. So like if you were drink out of water bottles primarily, or if you drink out of a special plastic water bottle that you bring with you to practices or to the rink, knowing how many ounces are in that bottle and dividing that with what your goal is for that day, and knowing that you need to drink 3 of those bottles to get you hydrated enough to get to practices. So that is the first thing that I would say is really important. I would say that half your body weight in ounces does not include the hydration needed for practice and training. You actually need more hydration during practices and training because you are sweating out a lot of fluid. So sipping on fluid between shifts is really important. Getting a good amount of water before and after you are on the ice is really important. I know with COVID that has been a little bit different with sharing water bottles and all of those things, but trying to get in your fluid at least before and after a game is super, super important if you can. I think a really good way to find out if you are hydrating well enough is to look at the color of your urine. I would say that usually your first void of the day is a really good indicator of how well you hydrated the day before. But any time you go to the bathroom, you can take a look and see where you're at. The lighter, the more lemonade colored you are, that means that you are hydrated. If you're in that darker part, you might, even if you are drinking enough water, you might not be getting enough electrolytes. So if you drink a ton of water and your urine is still yellow, I would say that you probably need to add in some electrolytes. Electrolytes could be things like Gatorade. It could be like a powder you throw into your drink. It could be adding a little bit of salt into whatever you're drinking. There's all different types of electrolyte products, but mainly the main component we're looking at for electrolyte is sodium. Sodium is the thing you're sweating out the most. So I would say the drink that I typically see a lot of people drinking but doesn't have a lot of electrolytes is Body Armor. Body Armor is one electrolyte drink that actually has one of the lowest amounts of sodium. It is a great hydrator if you don't have electrolyte problems, but if you do, if you're a heavy sweater that also feels super salty, like you get salt on your forehead after sweating a lot, or your hats get salt around them, then you need something a little bit more sodium dense than maybe a Body Armor or a Propel water. You'll definitely need a little bit more than that. But dehydration can really lead to performance detriments. You definitely can see your performance going down if you're not well hydrated. On the other spectrum, I've seen athletes go to be overhydrated. I think making sure that you're not drinking your whole body weight in ounces per day is really important. You might start feeling dizzy at practices, or you might feel lightheaded. I've had players complain of cramping if they've been overhydrated as well. So making sure that you're kind of in that middle ground is really important. But you can go both ways. You can have too much water too, but most of the time what I see is that athletes are not having enough water. One of my favorite topics next to hydration to talk about is recovery. This is something that is especially important for an athlete. You have your bookends to your workout. You have your pre-snack to your practice or your game, that carbohydrate drink or that carbohydrate snack. And then you want to end your practice or your game with a recovery. And so I wanted to give 3 options of what recovery could look like. First option could be something like a shake or a smoothie. It can be a chocolate milk. It can be a protein shake that you've made yourself. It can be a smoothie. It really doesn't matter, but sometimes people prefer something liquid. I would just say that you need to make sure that there is both carbs and protein in that drink. How I explain recovery is that when you are training, you are taking your muscles and you're tearing them apart. And so the protein comes in and fills in the spaces, and you need the carbohydrates to help get that protein in between the muscles that you are tearing apart during training. So if you eat something that is just protein after recovery, you are not doing the best recovery you can do for yourself. Doing recovery efficiently and quickly after training is also important because it helps with reducing soreness. It helps with reducing injury. What we want to do is get you some type of option. So my first option is a shake. That is usually for my athletes who don't really feel hungry after a practice or a game and just need to get something into their bodies. Some people might be wanting a little snack. So you can find something that contains a protein or carbohydrate. So a protein bar is a really great option. Sometimes a small sandwich or a Greek yogurt, some pretzels with some peanut butter. Those could be some good options to get some carbohydrates and protein into your body. Lastly, if you had a late game or an early game and you don't really want to have a snack, you just want to go straight into a meal, that is totally fine. Sometimes post-game meals are provided or an option. You get out of your game and you want to go to dinner with your family, that totally works. As long as you're getting it in within 30 to, I say here 60, but ideally at least 90 minutes. If you can get it within that window, eat a meal. It's totally fine. You're getting enough carbohydrates and protein in a meal. So I'm totally fine with people skipping a smoothie or a snack and going straight into a meal if that's what works best for their timing. And another topic that I get asked a lot is, should I be taking a supplement? Especially, should my child be taking a supplement? There are times where a supplement is appropriate. If you have some type of a deficiency that a physician has detected, or you might be having some type of injury that requires some supplementation, those are appropriate times. But most of the time, if you are under the age of 18 years old, a supplement isn't typically recommended. That's because 30 to 40% of youth athletes are, first of all, not eating breakfast. So they are not perfecting their meal timing. They're also not eating enough food, especially when they're at school. Their meal composition and their meal timing is completely off already. They're also not drinking enough. So a supplement that might be helping them with cramping or some other thing might not be appropriate if they're not even drinking enough water. So I like to say that there's a lot of things that we need to make sure we're doing right before we look for a supplement. There are times where supplements are appropriate, but most of the time we can get by with eating enough whole foods and eating more times in the day and same result. Sometimes we quick fix, and that usually doesn't really help us in the long run. What I also want to talk about is that supplements include things like protein powders, pre-workout, and some vitamins. I'm not saying your normal multivitamin, but there are some vitamins or supplements that people take for performance that you can find in a health food store or a supplement store. I would definitely be careful about those just because supplements are not regulated. Nobody regulates supplements in the United States. You can slap anything on a bottle and sell it in a store. It does not matter. It typically doesn't even have to be the product that is on the label that is in the container. No one is going to check that. It is not regulated. So what I tell my athletes to look for, because this can be a pretty scary thing that you don't really know what's in that container, is that we look for two specific types of labels: informed choice or NSF certified for sport. This means that it has been tested so that the label meets the stuff that is inside and that there are no banned substances. There is no chance of, if you are playing in a league that is testing you for drugs, that you will test positive, especially if you go to the collegiate level, and that there's no toxins in there that could be harmful to your body. This is especially important for athletes that are under the age of 18 years old, because these products, first of all, are not tested for athletes under the age of 18 years old. And because you are growing, there is more room for absorption of toxins and banned substances that might be harmful to your body. And they might metabolize in a way that normal in an adult, because you are growing and absorbing a lot more than what we typically do as adults. So if you are thinking about a supplement, I would talk to a medical professional. Mainly dietitians are really well versed in this, but if you are in a place where there's an athletic trainer or a coach that could maybe, or a strength and conditioning coach that could maybe look at this, those are also really good choices. Also, talking to your coach could also be a good place to start to find you the resources to get the right supplements. But making sure that you're taking quality products is especially important. I find too often that a lot of youth athletes will go to the supplement shop and the guy behind the counter will be like, if you take this, you'll get bigger, you'll get stronger. But they don't realize what they might be taking are steroids or synthetic steroids. And that really does mess with their development. It messes with their body composition long term. It can do a whole slew of things that are really detrimental to them. So I like to talk about the risks of taking supplements that you are not aware of what is inside. Probably the only supplement that I think is really okay for an athlete under the age of 18 to take is a whey supplement, a whey protein supplement, because we find them in our protein bars, we find them in the protein shakes we buy in the stores. That is very well receptive use. We don't see any problems with those supplements, but things like pre-workout or any type of or growth supplement is really not recommended. So finally, I just kind of wanted to go over some take-home points to cover a couple last things that I think I wanted to make sure you guys knew about. So again, eating consistently is important, especially to meeting goals. If you want to gain weight, you need to be eating consistently, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If you want to lean out, you need to be eating consistently, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It doesn't matter what your goal is, you need to eat consistently. What changes is really what the composition of your meal looks like based on your training, based on your needs. Carbohydrates are an essential form of fuel for hockey. You need carbohydrates. Work on getting more carbohydrates as a pre-fuel snack and into your recovery as well. Hydration can affect your performance. If you are not hydrating well, if you are not drinking enough water, you could be doing yourself a disservice as an athlete to be doing the best work you could do on the ice. So focusing on your hydration, getting proper hydration in is really, really important. And lastly, recovery is essential for growth and performance. This is something that should be nailed in pretty early on. Getting your recovery after every training and workout is super, super important. Whether it's a snack, a meal, or a drink, you need to get that recovery in. So now I just wanted to thank you guys all for being here on a Saturday night. I do have my social media handles posted on here and my email, also my cell phone number. Feel free to reach out that way if you are comfortable. But I really do think that nutrition is something that we should talk more about in the hockey world, and that should be more focused on, because I think that it really does help with development as youth athletes and as athletes in general. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions at this time. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah, Colette, actually, I had a couple just quick questions.
I'm going to stop sharing so that I can actually see some faces,
Yeah,
but I can always go back to the slides if we need to.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, I can see that a lot of people do change their nutritional habits. But I mean, do you suggest things like writing down what they're eating, what they're drinking? I mean, I've suggested in the past with our players, and sometimes that helps a lot. I mean, I just wanted to see if you had any suggestions of that nature, just because, we get a lot of kids that come to our practice like, I've had a lot of water today. And you're like, well, how much exactly? And those kind of questions are very hard for them to answer.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that getting a good gauge of where you're at different points in your training throughout the year is really important. So tracking every day can be really tedious for most athletes. I find that it is really hard to keep up with, but I encourage a lot of my athletes, especially my youth athletes, to pull out an app or write it down and track how much water they have for 3 days, or how much food, how many calories they're getting in for 3 days, and see if they're meeting their protein needs or their calorie needs as an athlete. And usually a sports dietitian or a dietitian can help determine those calorie needs, but there are some guidelines out there for caloric intake, but tracking can be a good way to just monitor where you're at. If you're not meeting your goals, maybe tracking for a couple of days to see why you're not meeting your goals. Are you eating enough? Are you drinking enough? But yeah, tracking is a really good way to do it. I personally like MyFitnessPal because you can scan things in. You can track your water in there. It does everything all at once, and I can take a look over different times in the year. So maybe during my season, I might track myself and see how I'm doing. And then maybe during the off season, I might also, just to see if I have a specific goal to meet in the off season, how am I going to get there and how much am I eating?
And you said there was an app. You said there was an app that you use, or?
Yeah, the basic MyFitnessPal is a really good one. There also is an app that's more geared towards athletes, youth athletes specifically, called My Sports. Hold on, it's called Eat to Win. And I can type that in the chat for people to know what it is called.
You'll email it to me, Colette. I'll email out to everybody your email and everything as well, along with
Perfect,
along with those apps and everything, so that everybody could see. Ms. Cowgill asked, is variety important, or can I eat the same foods all the time as long as it's the right composition? Specifically, do you need variety in the type of protein intake?
I think variety is important for fruits and vegetables, especially. I think that fruits and vegetables, because they are all different colors, have different purposes for our bodies. So the red ones are good for our heart. The green ones, do something else for our bodies. Every different color has a different vitamin and different nutrient. So we want to be able to have variety a lot of the times, mainly in our fruits and vegetables. It is nice to mix things up with proteins and carbohydrates. But if you have a couple that you really enjoy eating and they work for you, that is totally fine. Specifically with protein, if you're eating mainly lean beefs, like lean meats, like chicken or fish, or turkey, like those are really great options. It is okay to have red meat. You just don't want to have it all the time, and that's where variety comes in. So I do think variety is important because, again, fruits and vegetables are insurance for us. They keep us healthy. I see some other questions popping up.
So Stephen G1 asked, what do you think the most important meal of the day is?
For me, I find that breakfast is the most important meal of the day for most of my athletes because they are skipping it, 40 to 50% of the time. Most of the time, I don't have to pester my athletes to eat lunch or dinner. Those are things that they typically do on a day-to-day basis, but breakfast is always the hardest. So I find that to be one of the most important meals in the day. Just because we don't get it regularly.
And it kind of jumpstarts your day too, right?
Absolutely, you need that fuel early on. You want to be eating most of your carbohydrates when you're the most active, so why not start with a breakfast in the morning to help get your body fueled up? But honestly, all meals are important.
Yeah, and just kind of to add to that, I mean, you kind of don't want to wait till you're super starving to eat, right? You kind of want to, eat more meals over the course of the day as opposed to a big, like you said, people miss breakfast. And by the time they get to lunch, they're really hungry. So they overeat. And by the, like for us during the week, we practice in the evenings. So you see a lot of kids that come out that are lethargic and tired, but they just ate because that was what they planned their day around.
Absolutely. I think that timing is really where we see a lot of issues with fueling. They skip breakfast, they don't eat enough at school, and then they try to backload all their calories towards the end of the day when they are trying to be the most active they can be, and that tends to weigh them down. So making sure you take a quality meal with you to school or pack a quality meal, and to get a good heavy breakfast in, especially if you know that you're going to be having a hard practice that evening. But yeah, that's a really common problem with youth athletes, is that they're not eating enough in the day and then they're overdoing it in the evenings.
Ms. Christine Parks asked, your thoughts on energy drinks and sugar. I've seen kids intaking sugar, i.e. chocolate, right before games. Is this helpful? Please advise.
Energy drinks are not my favorite for athletes. I find that they have a lot of different things in them that are really not good for anyone of any age, but especially under the age of 18, because again, what I said was that there's so much stuff in those things that are not really well known to know how they affect children. So I'm not a really big fan of energy drinks in young athletes. I think there is an appropriate time and place maybe for adults, but honestly not all the time. But as far as sugar, carbohydrates in general are important as fuel for games. But the type of sugar can be important depending on your goal. But for some athletes, that quick burning sugar before a practice or a game is really what they need. They might have 30 minutes before they get on the ice and they need to get something in them. It's probably better to get something that is a little bit more quick burning, like fruit snacks, a Rice Krispie treat, a granola bar, something that is a little bit more simple sugars, fresh fruit. Those all could be options for pre-game fuel. But I mean, chocolate can work. I would say that chocolate sometimes has a lot of fat in it. So high fat products before a game or practice can give you an upset stomach. But high carbohydrates are really important for pre-fueling for a practice or a game.
Okay. Mr. Robert Brill asked, what are good foods to have for breakfast?
So when you look at your athlete's plate or the meal composition, you want to have something that is a protein source, a carbohydrate source, and then a color, a fruit and a vegetable. So a good breakfast could be a breakfast sandwich, something where you have like an English muffin with an egg in between, and then you maybe saute some vegetables, or you grab an apple on the side and you eat that. That could be a really good breakfast. Another good breakfast could be oatmeal with some like turkey sausages or chicken sausages on the side, and maybe sprinkle some berries on top of your oatmeal, or, you know, have another piece of fruit on the side. Those are two of my top breakfasts. You can also do like waffles with peanut butter and like some bananas in between and make it a little breakfast sandwich that way. Um, the possibilities are endless as long as you have those three components in there.
Great. This is actually a great question. Desi Prieto asked, is there a certain type of meal that you would would help with growing pains?
So growing pains are usually pretty normal with youth athletes. There's nothing you can really do to stop the pain from growing pains. Things that you might be able to do to help with a little bit of the inflammation is increasing some of your omega-3 fatty acids, such as eating more salmon throughout your week. You also could try something like a tart cherry juice, before a cold tart cherry juice before bedtime. That helps with getting you more quality sleep, which is typically hard when you're having growing pains. And tart cherry juice is known to help with inflammation. So you can try something like that a couple nights a week and see if that helps. But a lot of the times with growing athletes, just making sure you're getting enough calories to meet the needs of your growth can really help a lot and make growing a little bit easier.
Okay. And George Needs asks, how long before practice should you eat?
That's a pretty personal question. I think it's definitely up to the person and how they feel. Like if you can get on the ice with a little bit more of a full stomach, then 30, maybe 30 minutes before, maybe 20 minutes before practice. But I've seen people have something from 2 hours up to 15 minutes before practice. So you definitely can do, you know, any of those times, as long as you're meeting what's comfortable for you. Because I don't want you throwing up on the ice just because I said you should have something 30 minutes before practice.
Yeah. I think a lot of people have that kind of issue where they, the pre-planning, the planning is very important before. So just making sure you have your ideas of what your day is going to look like, and then obviously adjust accordingly.
Yeah, planning is one of my most important habits that I try to instill in my athletes. If you're at school or practice, make sure you're getting your snacks in your bag. If you are really bad at like making sure you have something packed, throw like a box of protein bars into your gym bag. Or make sure that mom has something in the car for you every day when she picks you up from practice, whatever it has to be. But planning is essential for athletes.
Yeah. And then Desi asked, is it good to not eat before practice?
Adrian messed that up. It's supposed to be, is it bad not to eat before practice?
I'm sorry. All right. Is it bad to not eat before practice? I guess it depends on the time frame, Adrian, correct?
Yep. So it depends. If you haven't eaten that day and you're going into practice, probably a bad idea. If you had a meal maybe 3 hours before, I would say that's okay. But again, I talked about timing. You don't really want to go more than 3 or 4 hours without a meal. So if you are going to have an hour to 2 hour practice and you didn't have a snack before practice, and you know it maybe is going to take you 45 minutes to get home and get showered before you can get a meal, you probably need to have a snack before practice.
And so Bjorn, yes, she did say tart cherry juice. said it would help you sleep at night, which will help kind of alleviate some of those pains with the inflammation. And then Joel raised his hand. Do you have a question, Joel?
I do have a question. I think one of the hardest things I have always tried to figure out when trying to feed my child is when we go to tournaments or if we have a Kaha weekend and we have multiple games in one day, what to do between the first game and the second game, how much to eat, what to eat. That's always the hardest part for me. Do you have any recommendations for what we should do on multiple game days?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you have multiple games in one day, I would really focus on carbohydrates between games, and then really worry about the protein maybe after all the games are done. Trying to get something in between each games is really important to get those muscles fueled back up to full tank. So depending on your athlete, it can vary with what they can tolerate. Some might only tolerate liquids because it's really hard for them to have a full stomach during a game. So things like Naked or Bolthouse Farm smoothies are really good to keep around with you, and have them sip on that as they're waiting for their next game. Some things that are more solid could be like fresh fruits or applesauce, or maybe something like a fruit leather or like some fruit snacks could be really helpful. If they can tolerate real food, that would be probably the best thing you can do. But if not, then finding some granola bars, maybe some trail mix, something of that sense that they can have in between games could be really helpful. The one thing I would avoid is something that's high in fat. So fried foods or fatty foods would be something to avoid in between games because that can cause an upset stomach.
Okay.
Awesome. Thanks for that question. That's a really good one. We see that a lot with youth athletes, either multiple game series in one day or over the weekend, and getting that recovery nailed in between those games is what's going to make it or break it for your team, honestly.
Great. Colette, thank you so very much. Everybody that was on here will we're going to post
Looks
this
like we have
obviously.
one more hand raised. Sorry.
Oh, Chris,
I don't mean
Chris, you have a
Hey
question?
there, sorry for the late entry,
No problem.
No,
but how is it detrimental? With a lot of these kids, it's hard to get them to eat enough, right? Like they're on the move all the time and they're doing all kinds of stuff. I mean, is it worth it to give them these kind of junk calories? Have a bowl of ice cream before you go to bed, do that kind of stuff just to help them, get enough fuel in their body. I know it's not quality, but is the quantity important in that sense, or does that help?
yeah, I think that can be okay. They think that they can just not eat all day and then get ice cream. But I think that if you notice that their nutrition for that day is lacking, that you can encourage with things like ice cream or maybe a shake, or giving them some of their favorite treats, making sure that there's stuff at dinner time that that they'll like to eat, because I know that picky eaters can be really difficult, especially at the youth level, with making sure they get enough to eat. But a lot of the times with growing athletes, it's just getting the calories in. As they get a little bit older, when they're in their later teens, quality matters a lot more. But if we're just talking about fueling, it really is just calories, getting in more calories for those kids that maybe aren't just really under fueling.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. That was a good one as well.
Great. And we just want to say thank you very much, Colette. Again, we'll send out your information to everybody, and we'll link it to the YouTube video once we post it. Sorry, I had an uninvited guest show up. But this is obviously great information, and I think it's undervalued by so many athletes about how important it is to hydrate and to have proper nutrition and to make sure that they're fueling their body so that they're ready for games and ready to perform.
Absolutely. And there's just really not that many resources out there for hockey as there is with a lot of other sports. So figuring that out, that's like what I am here for. So if anybody has questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm hoping at some point in the off season to maybe get some type of a hockey nutrition class together for athletes. That could be really beneficial for some of the athletes that are having a hard time fueling. But these are habits that brought in on. And thank you guys so much for having me. I look forward to hearing from you guys, and I hope you guys enjoyed it today.
It was very helpful, and we really appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much, Colette. Hopefully we'll have an opportunity to meet with you again once you put that class together, and we'll send out your information. So again, thank you, and thank you everybody for joining today. Have a great day.
All right.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
It'd be fun.